Welcome, everybody, to the 2025 Voices of the ARM Industry. I'm Chris Murphy. Ignore what it says on my name identify. I'm affectionately referred to as Murph. I'm with debtlink.com, and we're excited to be hosting another one of our webinar series here at debtlink.com. I want to do a quick moment to introduce my partner, Chris Runcie, who's the well-known player in the industry. Chris, welcome, and I want to let you take it from there.
Thanks, Murph. We'll run to the next slide. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I first want to thank our sponsor today, Payment Vision. We will hear from Scott very briefly, and I want to talk about bankruptcies. We've got a group of industry experts with us today covering different facets of the bankruptcy industry, and we're very excited that you've decided to join us today. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. We are recording this. We will be sending a link to the recording approximately 24 to 48 hours after the event, along with contact information for each of our panelists and our sponsors. So joining us today are Jonathan Koop, President of Bankrupt Debt Services, Gary Perdue, President and CEO of Peritus Portfolio Services, and Jeff Hanson, Manager of New Business Sales at RNN Group. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
All right, guys. So again, Payment Vision is a sponsor for today, so you got to have a little bit of a commercial, right, for Payment Vision. But basically, just so everybody understands, Payment Vision is a payment processor that has been helping the ARM industry since 1989. We actually are a technology patent holder of 9 industry patents, most of the which that our clients utilize in this space, right? So I think the big thing is that for us, we are trying to make sure that not only are we doing it from a very compliant way in the world of processing, but we're trying to make sure you keep up to date on all your technology pieces, your most efficient workings through, and making sure that money clearly hits the bank. Payment Vision specializes in customizing portals, IVR platforms, and most importantly, integrations back to your core platform that you might work your bankruptcy files in and or any other type of debt. So appreciate the time today, and I'm going to hand it back to Chris.
Thank you, Scott.
Mr. Runcie, I wanted to say thanks to Scott. It's awesome when I go to trade shows and we talk about Payment Vision being on our platform, and their first response is they are awesome people and fun to work with. So, obviously you can tell by looking at you, but in real life, without you're in the room, when you're not in the room, people do say nice things about you. So, Scott, appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to ask you, Jonathan, to tell us a little bit more about your company, your background, and how you ended up in the seat that you're in today.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Jonathan Koop. I am the founder and CEO of Bankrupt Debt Services. We've been in the industry for about 15 years now, and we specialize in the purchase of bankrupt accounts. We purchase bankrupt accounts for pretty much any type of creditor, banks, credit unions. We specialize in the fintech industry, so the purchase and management of their bankrupt loans. Like I said, the fintech industry is something that we really focus on. And we pretty much do everything associated with bankrupt accounts, but our specialty is the purchase of them.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan.
You bet.
Gary, you're up next.
Thank you. Thanks for having me as well. So Gary Perdue, founder, president, CEO of Peritus Portfolio Services. I've been in the finance industry in some aspect or another, be it lender, spent some time as an auto lender, spent some time with a technology company connecting lenders to auto dealers. Started this company in 2010. Originally started purchasing auto-secured bankrupt accounts, but after about 5 years, we moved towards servicing. Today, we have over 30 clients that we service for, including some very large lenders, both on the auto side, credit card, online lenders, do some medical debt. We basically service anything with the exception of a mortgage business.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Gary. And last but not least, Jeff, I'm going to ask you to run through your background for us and tell us a little bit about RNN.
Sure. I started in the collection industry about 30 years ago as a student loan collector and quickly moved into operational management. And I was in operational management at both the collection agency level, original creditor level, collection law firm level. And about a year and a half ago, I made the transition from operations to sales and moved over to R&N Group. So many of the obstacles that other panelists face and I've faced on the operational side. Now I try to solve those from a data perspective.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And how about just a little bit more about RNN Group specifically?
Sure. R&N Group is a data procurement vendor. We specialize in trying to be all things data for consumer collections. We do also have some products that target the commercial collection space, but we do provide compliance scrubs, right party skip trace contact information, as well as verified assets.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you for that, gentlemen.
Hey, Chris, before we go much longer, can you just take a second and talk a little bit? For there's some people on here that may not know much about DebtLink, and I don't want to be that salesy. So can you tell them a little bit about us?
Yeah. So we created DebtLink on the heels of COVID after realizing that most of the traditional industry directories were missing the mark. We felt like there was a better way for companies that provide services to the ARM industry to find and connect with one another. So roughly 26 months ago, we launched an online platform where anybody can come to the site for free and search by keyword or category for vendors that provide the services that they are interested in. And one of the things that's most unique about the site is that you have the ability to do filtered searches. So in our example today, if you were looking for a BK servicer or a BK buyer, we have the ability to filter for those companies specifically on the website.
Awesome. Thanks. And with that, we can jump into our topic of the day, which is bankruptcy, all things bankruptcy.
So due to a variety of reasons, we felt like this was very topical, given what's going on. I'm sure if you follow the news, you have noticed that rising inflation, higher interest rates, some lingering pandemic effects, consumer bankruptcy filings are rising to levels that we have not seen in almost a decade. With the addition of tariffs and now resumed collections on federal student loans after a long pause, we are probably going to see rates rising even further in the months ahead. So we thought it would be timely to talk about some of the things that you can do today to prepare yourself and to specifically manage your BK accounts more efficiently. And so we're going to talk about 4 different main topics. First, we're going to launch you into a brief discussion about what makes bankruptcy accounts special and unique from regular charge-offs. Then Jeff is going to tell us a little bit more about the different methods for efficiently identifying and monitoring your bankrupt accounts. Then we're going to turn it over to Gary to talk about some of the benefits of outsourcing bankruptcy accounts. And then lastly, we'll turn it over to Jonathan to talk about some of the benefits of selling your bankruptcy accounts.
Awesome. Awesome. So with that, we'll go to the next page.
Jonathan, I might ask you, since you sent me some of these statistics today, maybe you could comment a little bit, and Jeff and Gary, I'd welcome you guys to jump in as well. But tell us a little bit about what's going on right now in the BK market.
Yeah, so without getting too much into the numbers, May bankruptcies this year, as opposed to last year, went up about 7%. Doesn't sound like a huge increase, but it really is. It's a very large year-over-year increase, and I think we're going to continue to see that. The number of consumers filing for Chapter 7s increased 11% year over year. So as you can see, in May of 2025, there was around 28,000 Chapter 7 filings versus the previous year, which was around 25,000. Chapter 13s didn't increase a whole lot year over year, but I think that's going to change. I think coming into the summer months and especially towards the holidays, this trend is really just going to keep going in that direction. I don't want to be the doom and gloom kind of person on the call, but I think bankruptcy filings are going to go up, for all the reasons that Chris just mentioned. In addition to a lot of the things that Chris said with the consumer debt numbers really piling up, there's another section of consumer debt with the buy now, pay later things that are just now getting reported, and that's going to even increase that total debt number even more, and it's going to have a tail end effect with bankruptcies being filed towards the end of this year and next year.
And maybe it would be worthwhile. I don't want to assume that everybody knows, but Jonathan or Gary, could you maybe talk about the difference between a 7 and a 13, just in case anyone with us today isn't familiar?
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. A Chapter 7 is a liquidation of the consumer's assets. The creditors rarely get paid in a Chapter 7. And a Chapter 13 is a restructure of the debtor's assets where the creditors are put on a payment plan. So a lot of what we're talking about today with servicing and purchasing is mainly geared towards Chapter 13s where the creditors are getting some money from those.
Perfect.
If I might jump in here too, just to talk about the increase in filings, a little bit of history. Prior to COVID, my average monthly filings were somewhere between 55 and 60,000 per month. And since 2021, if you were to look at year over year, 21, 22, 23, 24, every single month, looking at the prior year, the increases were around 15%. Now, obviously, with bankruptcy filings being back up closer to what they were prior to, that percentage of increases isn't as high. The other thing that's interesting about why bankruptcy filings aren't back up to the 60,000 unit range yet is the one piece that's missing are those that used to file because of foreclosures. There's not nearly as many foreclosures now as there were prior to COVID, mainly because property values have increased. So if you get behind on your mortgage and you go into foreclosure, you just sell it and go buy another one. That piece is missing. And there's also some that medical debt being the reason that people filed. That's down quite a bit because they're not being reported on the Bureau as much as they used to be, so it's not driving as many bankruptcies. But that core reason that people file bankruptcy, the piece that probably everyone on this call is collecting and charging off, they are most likely back to the same levels they were prior to COVID.
Interesting. So something that you may not have been watching as closely 4 or 5 years ago is now a lot more important.
Correct.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. Let's talk about, so we did talk about the different types of consumer bankruptcy filings. Gary, do you want to tell us a little bit about sort of the risks of not adhering to the stay? So a debtor files BK, the creditor gets notified through a couple of different possible options, but what are the consequences of ignoring that information or mishandling it?
So, there's an automatic stay when the debtor files bankruptcy. And if someone violates that stay, in other words, try to collect on that debt, not only can they be sanctioned within the court, but there's also the possibility of state regulations being violated, and you can be sued. And if it happens enough, it can cost you a lot of money. We see in the cases, in fact, I can cite a case where an automobile got repossessed after a bankruptcy, and while they were challenging that, they found some other issues within the documentation, and that debtor ended up, I can't remember what state it's in, yes, I do know where it was. It was in Wisconsin. The penalties can be very stiff. That debtor ended up not only getting back everything they had paid for that car, but they got the car free and clear title.
Wow.
So there can be some pretty serious consequences if you violate that stay.
And so I think a consequence of that, and we often see this in handling debt sales for creditors and for some debt buyers, is the creditor or the debt buyer will err on the side of conservatism. And if a debtor informs them on a phone call that they're filing BK, they often will status it as a pending BK just to ensure that they don't violate any stays. But what we see is that sometimes those accounts don't get remarked and they'll sit in a pending BK status. And so the current status on the account's not accurately captured. Jonathan, I'm sure you see quite a bit of that in the scrubbing work that you do on some of the purchases.
Yeah, you do see a lot of that. I work a lot with debt buyers, and usually the debt buyer isn't going to be listed as a creditor on the bankruptcy schedule. So the debt buyer doesn't know that that account's in bankruptcy. So they're running the risk, like Gary just said, with the automatic stay, and their collection agency or them calls this debtor unknowingly. Usually you can kind of slide by the first or second time. If you didn't know that the borrower is bankrupt, it's okay. But as it keeps happening, you're going to run into a real problem.
Yep. And I think that's actually, oh, go ahead, Jonathan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, as it's conversely, kind of what Chris said, a lot of times these debtors,
Broughton froze.
Hopefully he'll come back. We'll give him a second.
Yeah, from my experience, he may be going down that path. There's where debtors say they're going to file just to.
even more important point of why you want to be proactive as a creditor to find those.
Yep. And Jeff, actually, I think that's a perfect segue into our next slide, Jeff. So there are a variety of different ways that a creditor or a debt buyer, an account owner can identify and monitor BK accounts. I know 30 years ago when I got into this space and I owned an agency, we used to get mailed notifications from the trustees. Things have obviously progressed significantly since then. I know you have the ability to do batch processing, but Jeff, maybe you could just sort of take us through the different options that are available today to folks who are looking to monitor, to identify and to monitor their BK accounts.
Sure. I can tell you from when I was on the operations side, even, several years ago, like you referenced earlier in the call, we did mark accounts as pending bankruptcy when a consumer told us that they were intending to file bankruptcy or they had an upcoming meeting to file bankruptcy or whatever the case was. Many of our clients at that time wanted us to err on the side of caution. And yes, accounts got stuck there unless someone went back and checked them. And there was, there's obviously Pacer where you can go in and check an individual for bankruptcy. Like Jonathan mentioned, sometimes if it's a debt buyer, you're not notified of the bankruptcy and you're running the risk of contacting individuals. So what R&N does and what other companies have the ability to do is we run a batch process where our clients can submit a file of, it could be one account, it could be 10,000 or 50,000 accounts, or we can actually monitor their entire inventory, and we can do daily checks or weekly checks to identify bankruptcies based on name, social security number, and birth date, and provide that information back to our clients so that they can effectively mark the accounts that should be marked bankruptcy, follow their client rules as far as if they don't own the debt, if they're to close and return them upon notification of bankruptcy, do they put them on hold? If they are the debt buyer, determine what steps they're going to take with the bankruptcy, and make sure that if it's a situation where they need to file a proof of claim or anything else, that they're handling all the steps appropriately and they're not violating a stay of bankruptcy because they have that information on a real-time update via daily or weekly updates.
Yeah. So you would sort of consider monitoring to be the best practice?
I would say yes. I would think it eliminates more risk that way.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. And you mentioned proofs of claim, so maybe we could spend another minute just talking about that. And there's typically, and again, my understanding here is very high level, there is a very short window within which a creditor or a debt buyer, an account owner, can file that proof of claim. If they don't do it in a timely fashion, they effectively lose rights to access those funds.
Correct. There would be, a schedule, a time frame allowed per the bankruptcy filing date and the rules associated with such. And if they don't file their proof of claim, yes, they would be ineligible to file a claim past that date.
Well, Gary, what's that window of time typically for POC filing from the notification to the date? Is there a standard?
There is on Chapter 13, it's 70 days.
Okay.
On a Chapter 7, if and when assets are found, I believe that's 90 days, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Jonathan, you might know the answer to that. He's frozen again.
So the point being, not a lot of time. And if you miss it, or the account's misstatused, all the more reason, Jeff, to be monitoring. Are there other advantages to monitoring over batch processing, or is it pretty much what we've talked about?
I mean, I think monitoring, you're just ensuring that you're getting notified as soon as the bankruptcy is filed, and you're taking those precautions to make sure you're not violating a stay. You're not contacting someone who's filed bankruptcy. You're protecting your client by ensuring that if they placed it with a law firm or an agency, that those bankruptcies are identified and they're just not contacting those individuals until conclusion of the bankruptcy or discharge of the bankruptcy.
And so actually you bring up another good point. There's often a change in status. Isn't it true that a debtor frequently, they'll file, it could get dismissed, and then they'll subsequently refile? And we see that in a lot of portfolios that we're selling where the status actually changes. Is that a common occurrence?
Jonathan could probably provide an answer as far as more how common it is, but I can tell you in the years I was in operations, yes, we would often see a filing, then a dismissal, discharge. We would continue to monitor the account until conclusion of the bankruptcy.
Yeah, and another thing you'll see is someone will file for bankruptcy. As a creditor, you file that proof of claim. Then the debtor will get dismissed. Then he'll refile for bankruptcy, and you have to refile that proof of claim. And 9 out of 10 times, if you're not monitoring that, the likelihood of you catching that the second time is very slim.
Yeah.
And that just makes monitoring these accounts that more important.
Yeah, and especially when you consider, we're going to talk about selling BK accounts and servicing the accounts. We're going to talk about recovery rates. Just in the case of a sale, that can be a pretty significant. We're talking about pricing north of 10 cents on active 13s. That can be a pretty significant loss of revenue.
Oh yeah, we see it pretty often. That's why the monitoring aspect is so important.
Yeah. Jeff, before we jump to Gary and to talk a little bit more about outsourcing BK accounts, for those on the call today who maybe don't have a lot of accounts, are there any sort of minimums when you're applying for or interested in monitoring services?
There's not. Okay. In fact, I work with a couple small law firms that we monitor a couple hundred accounts for. We have some clients that will just, every time they get a new file in, it could be 50 accounts, it could be 5,000 accounts. They send that account at that new batch at that time to have it checked for bankruptcy and deceased, and then they'll roll it into the monitoring process. But we, at our end at least, we only charge for hit notifications. So if we're monitoring 10,000 accounts and we identify 100 bankruptcy hits that month, that's what they're charged for. They're not charged for the submission of the accounts necessarily.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like there's really any downside.
No.
Okay, great. All right, Gary, I want to talk about, we'll pause for a minute. See, Chris, did I hear some questions come in, or are we good for the time being?
No, I did. We're good for the moment, but I'm glad you brought it up. Attendees that are on there, feel free to throw any questions either in the chat or the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We're monitoring that, and I will be sending out a question or a quiz or two after this set of slides.
Perfect. Okay, Gary, so now we want to talk about some of the reasons why folks might want to consider outsourcing their bankruptcy accounts based on identification. It sounds like a complicated process. So give us give us an overview of why someone might want to outsource the bankrupt accounts.
Sure, thank you. So, so today, many lenders and debt buyers still will service bankruptcies in-house. However, that's changing, and it seems to be changing fairly rapidly due to increased cost of funds, increased losses. Everybody's looking for a way to cut expenses, and certainly outsourcing is a way to do that. But I always go back to the first bullet point on my slide here is, bankruptcy is 1% of your portfolio. And I always ask potential clients, what do you do well 1% of the time? Servicing is 100% of what we do, and other servicers that are out there, it's either 100% or it's close to 100%. So, the question is, who's going to do it better? One of the things that you think that you need to think about is, while there's one federal bankruptcy code, there's 90 federal bankruptcy districts, there's 199 trustees, and of course there's over 1,000 debtors' attorneys. Every federal district and every trustee has their own local rules, and there are a lot of attorneys out there that I don't want to say play games, but they work the system to their benefit and their clients' benefit at the creditor's peril. And if you're servicing it yourself, you're not generally going to have visibility to that, because you're not doing enough servicing in any area to be able to understand, what goes on in the different areas. Things such as, in different districts, the Chapter 13 plans are written differently. In certain districts, if you let the debtors' attorneys get away with it, they'll set it up so they get their fees before anybody else gets any money. Things of that nature. And then there are debtors' attorneys, a few of them in particular that everybody knows about, that once their debtor files bankruptcy, once their customer files bankruptcy, they will review every piece of paperwork that they ever got from you, and they'll try to find a way to sue you in the state, under the state statutes. So by using someone who's outsourcing, or if you're outsourcing the servicing, someone that's doing this 100% of the time, they're going to have visibility into those little areas. Another part is the cost of service in-house versus outsourcing. Because most servicers have built the tools and the processes to be more effective, more efficient, the cost should be better than if you're doing it in-house. For instance, we, through the use of APIs, pull in court and trustees information every night into our servicing system. Statuses on accounts are automatically updated and routed to a bankruptcy analyst if there's work that needs to be done as a result of those changes. We're able to send out the same way automated reporting to our clients, so they know what's going on with their accounts in real-time manner. There are several servicers in the market, but there are differences. People's models are a little different. Some servicers make their money on legal fees, so of course, anytime there's opportunity to file a motion or an objection, they're going to tend to do that. There are others, like our company, that we work on a contingency basis, and that's really what I recommend people look for if they're outsourcing servicing, particularly if it's in anything with the exception of mortgage. Mortgage business is totally different. But if you can find someone who's working on a contingency basis, that makes the most sense. Why? Because we're in this together. The more money I collect for my client, the more money I make. The less money I spend on legal fees, the better my client benefits and I benefit, because that all goes into the equation as to how we earn money and how other servicers who work on a contingency model make their money.
That makes
One
sense.
last point I'd like to make is there are a lot of both lenders and debt buyers that still today don't think that having their bankruptcy serviced or filing claims is worth the effort. A couple of examples that we've had, we had a medical debt buyer that took us a year to convince them they were losing money. In fact, when we showed them that the numbers looked like they were losing about $2 million a year. But after that year, we finally convinced them they should have us service. Over the last 7 years, we've collected $3 million for that debt buyer. Another case where we had an online lender that their attitude towards bankruptcy and basically what they said to us, we take a passive approach to handling bankruptcies. It took us 3 years to convince them that filing a claim on an unsecured loan is about as passive as you can get. And we're now collecting $60,000 a month for that client. So, you know, if you think that it may not be worth your time and effort, look to servicers who work on a contingency. It costs you nothing if you get nothing, but I will guarantee you that you'll see some good results. One last point that I'd like to make before I hand it over to Jonathan. If you're not desperate and if you're not in a desperate need for cash, look for servicing. If you do need the money, I recommend sell it. And with that, Jonathan.
Perfect. I couldn't have done that better myself.
It's almost like you planned that.
Almost.
But Gary, before we jump, I want to ask one question of you. It's the same question I asked Jeff. Sure. Are there any minimums? If there's someone on the call today who maybe only has a handful or a couple of dozen BKs a month, is there an outsourcing opportunity there for you?
There are. I will tell you that while I don't have a minimum per se, there have been a few opportunities for us that were really too small for us.
Okay.
But we have a relationship. We have a relationship with an individual here in the Dallas area that will take on those smaller ones. And we vetted him. We like the way he operates, and we've turned a couple of clients over to him. So,
perfect.
You know, we'll talk to anybody, and if it doesn't work for us, we know we can get you with someone that it will work for.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, Jonathan, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get in the way there, but I wanted to make sure we covered that point.
And that's fine. And Gary, you made my job very easy here, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll just talk about a few points about the advantages of selling bankrupt accounts. I'll list these points off first and kind of go into more detail with them later on here. So number one is going to be your immediate cash flow. That's kind of what Gary mentioned. And the two other points are kind of what we've already touched on, and they're going to be operational efficiency and risk mitigation. And so I'll start with probably what makes our company the most unique and what I think is going to be most of what I talk about here on this slide, and that's immediate cash flow. And that's by selling these accounts, you're going to get immediate money, obviously, and what otherwise, if you're going to be waiting a pretty long time on a Chapter 13, they usually pay over the course of 5 years. And that first payment doesn't come for usually 6 months or so for the unsecured creditors. So you're taking that long cash flow and shortening that to just a one-time payment that we pay you up front. This kind of eliminates all the risk that comes later on the line with dismissals or conversions or anything that happens to the account. It's kind of a set it and forget it. We're buying the account. As a buyer, we're assuming all that responsibility, and the seller really doesn't have to worry about it, which is a really good thing because they can just worry about, you know, what they do well, kind of like what Gary mentioned. They're 99% of their business, and that's what they should be worried about.
Yep. Jonathan, quick question for you in terms of selling.
Yep.
So a creditor gets notified or debt buyer gets notified. Should they be thinking about selling before or after they file the proof of claim? How does that impact the decision?
Yeah, so most of our relationships, we're buying these before they file the proof of claim. So we're on what's called a forward flow with our lenders and debt buyers, where every month we're aggregating those bankruptcies up. Like was mentioned before, there's only about a 75-day window to file those proof of claims. So we're buying those accounts from them after they file for bankruptcy with enough time for us to file the proof of claims. So that eliminates any headache that the lender has to go through by filing the proof of claims themselves. We're doing all that so they can focus on their core competency. There is a smaller part of our business where we'll actually buy the accounts post proof of claim filing. So we work with a couple lenders that have dedicated bankruptcy staff on hand. They file the proof of claims. They usually package those up quarterly, and we'll come in and we'll go through those either quarterly or yearly and buy those as a larger bundle.
So there's just an additional kind of step in the transfer process in that case.
There's an additional step in as a creditor, you might get a little less money. Depends on the cash flow of the accounts and the balance. There is a $28 transfer a claim fee that's put in place by the bankruptcy court. That's not our fee. It's a court fee. And if you have smaller balance accounts, you can see how that fee over the course of 1,000 accounts can really dig into the purchase price.
Yeah.
But like I said, we do both models, but the first one I mentioned where it's pre-proof of claim, that's one we do mostly.
Perfect. Okay, I didn't mean to get in your flow there, but now you're going to talk about the next point. I'm sorry.
No. The operational efficiency aspect, I mean, this kind of goes without saying, but 1% of your portfolio is going to fall into bankruptcy. I mean, how much time do you want to spend on that 1% of accounts that go into bankruptcy? If you start from a standstill and you've never done this before, I mean, it'll take you 6 months to set up with all the different courts that Gary mentioned before and get those proof of claims filed. It's not as easy as it sounds. There's a reason that there's probably only a half dozen bankruptcy specializing companies in the country, maybe 6 to 8 of them, because it is a lot more than just filing a proof of claim and putting your feet up and waiting for money.
Okay. Oh, I think he froze. We'll give him a second.
So yeah, with operational efficiency, if you're a debt buyer, it's going to say you want to focus on what your company does best. If you're a lender, you want to make good loans. Ideally, you don't want to make loans to borrowers that are filing for bankruptcy. As a debt buyer, you want to buy good accounts that don't file for bankruptcy and leave that to the specialty companies like us. So yeah, as far as operational efficiency, those are kind of the points that I just mentioned. And the last one is going to be risk mitigation. There's a lot of risk in filing bankrupt accounts. Like Gary said, there's about a dozen debtor attorneys who will really hammer you hard for making small clerical errors like not adding up the principal, interest, and fees correctly. And one small mistake like that is really just a mistake can cost you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees defending yourself. So a lot of people think, filing bankruptcy claims, it's a no risk type of situation. And it's really not. We have lawyers on hand that handle these, and it seems like every 6 months to a year, there's a clever debtor attorney who kind of wants to drive fees up, which he's going to get paid back from the bankruptcy estate, just objecting to your claim for no reason or a very small reason. So those type of risks that come along with filing claims in bankruptcy and doing it yourself is really why you should rely on one of these people here on this call to handle that for you.
Very cool.
Gary, anything to add there, or Jeff?
Yeah. Just to that last point, Jonathan, that's a good point. And that's one of the things that when we get a new client who tends to not fight back. Attorneys around the country, they learn that very, very quickly, that, we can do whatever we want to lender A or debt buyer B, because they're not going to fight us. Well, we fight. We always, hit them back a few times, and then they know, oh, Peritus is servicing this portfolio. We need to play nice going forward, because they're just going to come back after us if we don't.
Yep.
So that's another benefit of outsourcing, is that, there's strength in numbers. And obviously, since we're servicing 400,000 or 500,000, I don't know what the count is anymore, but 500,000 accounts, then, the debtors' attorneys know us. Yeah. And they know the other servicers as well.
Yeah, you're going to see, there's nothing worse than some of these claim objections that seem to be pretty innocuous. And sometimes as a lender that, you don't know what you're doing, you think, all right, I'm just going to amend my claim and it's going to be over with. And the next thing you know, it's 6 months later and you have to hire a local attorney for something that's only a couple $1,000s. It ends up costing you a lot.
Very good. I'm going to, as we switch to the next slide, I'm going to launch a questionnaire that you'll see pop up on your screen for folks. So feel free to respond to that. In the meantime, if you have any other questions, let's see here.
Yep, the poll's up, Chris. It just showed up.
Awesome. Look at that. Blind squirrel struck. In the meantime, if there's a topic that we haven't addressed or something you'd like to ask, feel free to jump in the Q&A part as well while you're clicking on that poll that's there. And I just remember back in my day on the agency side and in the debt buying side, bankruptcies always felt like it was a trap. And on the agency, and then later when I got into the debt buying, it was interesting to watch how many debtors really were manipulating the system, because they figured out that agencies would just put them in the black hole. And so
that's a good point. Yeah. I think there's probably some Reddit threads out there that say if you're getting a lot of collection calls, just tell the collector you're in bankruptcy and they'll stop calling you. So a lot of people have used that strategy.
Yeah. So very interesting. Very interesting. I want to give this 30 more seconds.
Got a very quiet audience today.
Yeah. And as this later on, this webinar will be posted, and that's another area where we see a lot of action. So for our panelists, thanks for being here. I almost wanted to ask Scott, since you're there muted, anything new and exciting at Payment Vision while we're stalling for a second?
Oh, no reason to just stall. But yeah, I think it's obviously extremely important to, understand that your system of record and the statuses and everything come along, right? When it comes back down to what Payment Vision does, if we're in a suit experience that should have no payments being made, right? Your provider needs to be able to kind of understand those statuses, right? That system of record is holding for you so that you keep yourself out of those hot waters that Jonathan kind of, talked about right before, making sure that we're not taking payments when we shouldn't be taking payments, when the open window says, yes, take payments, what type of payments you want to be taking in that process, right? Maybe you don't want to have somebody set up anything besides maybe just kind of a PIF experience, right? Where there's just a only payment in full on this balance in comparison to not letting them set up, recurring or make other types of payment options. So just know that your system of record should work with your payment provider in conjunction to help yourself work those BK accounts in a good seamless way.
Great point.
Very cool. Mr. Runcie.
All right, so with that, I think we've got a couple of stops coming up next. You will see Chris or I at the ACA convention in July next month, and then we are hosting a pickleball tournament at the RMAI Executive Summit in early August. So we certainly hope to see folks at either or both of those events.
Wait a minute, you're really not selling the pickleball tournament as well as you should, Mr. Runcie. For those of you that are on here, or we'll see this in the future, go to the Executive Summit and again, attend the pickleball tournament. If you're not going to play, it's important that you go there just so you can chirp and trash talk. There's a lot of value there. Anyway.
It's Chris. I saw one question come in.
There we go. Let me see. Sorry about that. Okay, I'll read it out loud. Looks like it's not efficient to be in BK. If you don't have a deep knowledge and experience, and probability is low.
Profitability.
Profitability. Is that?
It's more of a statement than a question.
Right. And I guess Jonathan and Gary can really talk about, I mean, it's all a matter of profitability is a skill set.
Yeah, exactly. One person's trash is another person's treasure. This is all I think Gary, I, and Jeff have done for 30 years. So I guess we're doing pretty well.
Thanks.
It's definitely something that you really need to know what you're doing, and you need to have the processes and controls in place to make sure that you're doing the right things. The knowledge of and being able to get things done efficiently and effectively is very important. To that point, I have a third of my bankruptcy analysts actually worked in trustees' offices in the past. And as you can imagine, that really helps us get things done that most people, wouldn't know how to get done. So yeah, you definitely need to know what you're doing, and you need to pay attention to make sure you do it right. And you can never take it personally, because that's when you get in trouble.
Yeah, good points. Great points.
Yeah, I think this is one of those hidden jewels that, when managed properly, it's the difference maker in some of these portfolios. So.
Sure. Yeah.
So lastly, I'll talk a little before we sign off. We want to talk a little bit about DebtLink. So we are a comprehensive directory. Chris mentioned it before, but for any of you that are watching this video or this podcast, or will log in later, we offer a special webinar discount. So this is going to be good for 5 days. So any of you panelists that know people that are possibly looking to get on the DebtLink platform, if they use the code WEB2525, they will receive a 25% discount on their subscription. So that's an opportunity to take advantage of DebtLink. And I thank you for attending these webinars or viewing them. So that's available out there now.
Perfect.
We have one last question: is what is the rate of success relative to managing or collecting on bankrupt accounts?
The rate of success meaning, like, what does a creditor, like, percentage-wise usually see throughout the life of a Chapter 13?
Yes, that's correct.
It's a wide range, and you can correct me, but I've seen Chapter 13 creditors getting paid over the lifetime of the account anywhere between 10% to 40%. I know that's a wide range, but
is that unsecured or secured, or both, Jonathan?
That's unsecured. Okay. Gary can probably speak on the secured side a little better than I can.
Yeah. And also a range, on the secured side, primarily on auto. It depends on, is this buy here, pay here paper, which is going to generally collect between 60 and 70% of their balance, or is it prime auto paper, which, I had a portfolio that, this was back when we were acquiring a prime auto portfolio that we actually collected 106% of the principal balance. So it's a wide range, and it really depends on the credit quality going in. Believe it or not, just because they're bankrupt doesn't mean they're going to perform differently than they in a relative state, how they would have, depending upon their credit score and their incomes, before they filed bankruptcy.
Yep.
On the unsecured side, Jonathan's right. It can, and I will tell you, it's anywhere between 10 and 55%, because I actually have an online lender that we are seeing a 55% recovery rate.
Wow.
And And it's a little bit interesting because their credit quality is good, but they also have a very high, they have a younger age group, which tend to have less secured debt, more unsecured debt. So the unsecured creditors are actually getting paid sooner on that portfolio than we see on most. So the 55% is certainly an outlier.
Yeah.
But 40%, yeah, generally that's around the top of on the unsecured side.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's great, guys. All right, I think we're about ready to wrap up then. I want to thank Jonathan, Gary, and Jeff, and Scott at Payment Vision for sponsoring today. It was a great discussion. Everyone that's here today, we will make the slide presentation and a recording available in a follow-up email, and we will include contact information for each of our panelists and for our sponsor in that communication.
Thank you guys very much. Everybody else, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Okay.